But God determines it's not good for him to be alone. And so he causes him to fall into a deep slumber. And while this first original body is asleep and oblivious to everything that's going on, then he cuts into his side, he removes a rib, that is a remnant, a portion from his side, and then what does he do? He makes another body from that portion. And this body looks different, she speaks differently, she has a different perspective. The picture, Perry, is one body that falls, but while they're in this unconscious state, he removes a remnant. What were all the early believers?
Wow.
They were from that natural body. They were of the natural branch. But what does he do? He takes that remnant and makes another body. Right?
Wow.
But does the Father want them to remain two? The whole intention was what? That the two should become one. Because only then can you be fruitful and multiply.
Oh.
So from the beginning, his purpose has been to make the two one. Who are we talking about? Circumcision and uncircumcision. John 11, the Jewish nation, but not that nation only, but that he would gather together in one, the people of God who were scattered abroad. He wants the two to become one. And so now, that brings me to this. If the Father has been talking about the restoration of all things since the world began, and if we believe that we're living in the end of days, and I know that you do, and I do, and I'm going to just imagine that a lot of people watching do, then we should begin to see evidence of these two becoming one, of this one new man coming together. So now,
it's good.
We go to Matthew 17. I'm condensing like 4 hours into 20 minutes here, okay?
Trust me, he really is.
But in Matthew 17, we have another picture of this. The Messiah takes Peter, James, and John up to a high mountain. And he was transfigured before them. And if you'll recall, standing with him, speaking to him, was Moses and Elijah.
Right.
See, these are, if you will, witnesses that Yeshua is the Messiah. Now, Moses, would you say that he was well acquainted with the Torah?
Very much so. Since he wrote it.
Since he wrote it and everything, right. The Torah, the 5 books of Moses, the instructions of God. And so we see that he represents the Torah. But if he represents the Torah, then Elijah represents the prophets. Because the Messiah went to the Torah and the prophets as witnesses of who he was. Psalm 119 says, your Torah is truth. So if Moses represents the Torah, then he represents truth. Well, if he represents truth, and it can't just be truth, it has to be spirit and truth, then Elijah represents the spirit.
It's good.
But now, Moses, we know who his mother was. We know who his father was. We know what tribal affiliation he had. He was from the tribe of Levi.
We knew his brother and sister, too, didn't we?
We know all those things about Moses. But when it comes to Elijah, Perry, we have no such information.
It's true.
It doesn't tell us who his mother was.
So you going to tell us something tonight?
I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to tell you something.
I got a feeling we're going there now.
All it says in 1 Kings 17 verse 1 is Eliyahu HaTishbi Mitoshave Gilead. I'll translate. I wasn't speaking in tongues. Elijah the Tishbite and of the inhabitants of Gilead. That's all it says. So, Pierre, what I want to do is I want to give us a Hebrew lesson here.
I'll hold this up.
You hold that up.
Okay, let's try this here.
What we've got here is in Hebrew what it says. And I want you to notice, even if you don't read Hebrew, the top word, reading from right to left, it says Ha-Tishbi, translated as the Tishbite. Now, a lot of people think that Elijah is a Tishbite. That means that he's from some place called Tishbe. You know, I grew up in Albany, Georgia, so we were Albanians, you know. So in the West, we have the idea, well, he's a Tishbite. That must mean he's from Tishbe. The back of my Schofield Bible, there's a map that in Gilead, and it says T-I-S-H-B-E question mark. Like, we think maybe this is where it's at. But there is no place called Tishbe. So what does it say when it says that he is a Tishbite? Well, the next word in the Hebrew text gives us the clue, which is the second word down here on the bottom. And again, we're reading from right to left. Okay, that is the word that is called Mitoshave, and it's translated in your Bibles as of the inhabitants. So I want to do this. If we can see this, I want you to take the first letter and ignore it. That's the hey. That's the definite article, the.
Yeah.
And I want you to ignore this mem prefix, which means of or from. And then I just want you to compare the word tishbi with the word toshave. And even if you don't read Hebrew, here's what you see. They are the
It's
exact
identical.
same
Identical
word.
letters.
Now, here's what I want you to do.
Okay.
I want you to take your Strong's Concordance, and I want you to look up the word inhabitants in 1 Kings 17, verse 1. Go out to the side.
Don't do it
find
now,
the-
'cause you're
not,
teaching.
Not right now, but do it later. And I want you to find the number by that word inhabitants. And I want you to go and look in your Hebrew concordance, and here's what it's going to tell you about that word toshav. It means resident alien, stranger, foreigner.
Ooh, wow, come on.
You see, what it really says of Elijah is that he was not born an Israelite. He was not born ethnically Israeli. That he was a Tishbi because he was of the resident aliens, the foreigners who had joined themselves to the descendants of Joseph through Gilead. He was like Ruth, that woman who said, "Wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people are going to be my people. Your God shall be my God." And she becomes the great-grandmother of King David. In other words, what we have, Perry, then, on top of that mountain in Matthew chapter 17, is we have Moses and Elijah, the Torah, the prophets, truth and spirit, the natural branch and the wild branch. The two coming together as one. These are the two witnesses that Yeshua is the Messiah, the King of Israel, the King who is going to rule over one flock as one shepherd. And in that day there's going to be one king, and his name is going to be Echad. Now, who does that wild branch represent? We are that wild branch.
Romans 11.
These are the days of Elijah.
Yes.
We've been singing about it.
Come on,
We've
tell
been
us.
talking about it.
Tell us.
These are the days that those who weren't born ethnically Israeli, but have joined themselves to the God of Israel, to the house of David. We are witnesses that he is the Messiah. All right?
My.
But now,
My.
there's a couple other things that's really important here.
Yeah.
Let's say we represent, or Elijah represents us.
Okay.
Okay? So coming down the mountain, the disciples are asking, of all the questions they could have asked, where's Moses been? How did you make your face shine like the sun? Here's the question they ask. Why did the scribes say that Elijah must come first? And here's what Yeshua says. Elijah will indeed come first and will restore all things. Now, the Father has been speaking about the restoration of all things when? Since the world began. And the Messiah says that Elijah comes and restores all things. When Elijah went to the top of the mountain in 1 Kings 19 to Mount Carmel, which means the vineyard of God, the first thing he does before the fire ever falls is to take and repair or restore the altar of God that had been broken down.
All right,
he takes
now.
those 12 scattered stones, remember the people of God who were scattered abroad, he takes those scattered stones and restores them back to their proper place, puts everything back in order before the fire ever falls. And here's what I'm getting at. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a great responsibility in this day and time as it relates to the restoration of all things. Elijah will come and restore all things. When our Jewish brethren sit down at the Passover table and they set a place for Eliyahu HaNavi, Elijah the prophet, and there's a particular place in the Passover Seder when they send the children to the door and they sing Eliyahu HaNavi, Eliyahu HaTishbi, Eliyahu HaGiladi. May he soon come in our days speedily, for with him comes the Messiah, son of David. In other words, they're looking for Elijah to come and sit down at the table with them because they know that when Elijah shows up to sit down at the table with them, that very soon after, the Moshiach is coming. So if Elijah represents that wild branch, that is you and me, then who are our Jewish friends looking for to sit down at the table with them? Because when those two become one, then they know and we know that the Messiah is not far behind.
Isn't that something?
Right?
Now, something else, Bill. Powerful. This is the reason. This is the reason, in my opinion, that you see so many. We'd call them Gentiles, who blowing shofars, wearing tallits, and understanding the tallit, and why you see so many of them going back to understanding the feast, understanding Shabbat, the day of rest. The reason this is happening is Paul said that we provoke them to jealousy. They're going to ask us questions. They're going to see, why are you doing this? And then we point them to Yeshua in the feast and in those things. Would you agree with that?
I agree with that, because the word tishbi, toshav, is actually related to the word teshuva.
Which is to turn.
Is to turn back, to return. It's about us going back to God and to God's ways. Actually, here's the thing you need to understand. The bigger responsibility is not on them. The bigger responsibility is on us.
Wow.
The wild branch. It's the wild branch that provokes the natural branch.
True.
It wasn't Moses that he singled out to restore all things. It's Elijah who comes to restore all things. And so what we are doing is we return to the roots of our faith, to the feast days, not the Jewish feasts. These are my feasts, God says. These are my Sabbaths. These are my festivals. And so when we return to these things, as we're doing these things, because the Messiah said, if you love me, keep my commandments. Well, which commandments did he write? All of them. So as we return to him and his commandments, what it's doing, Perry, is provoking those of the natural branch.
Right.
Now to look at what they have not understood,
right.
and that is the identity of the Messiah. Can I say one other real quick thing here?
Very quick.
Just very quick. In Romans 8, since it's already been mentioned tonight, the earth is groaning in anticipation of the revealing of the sons of God.
Right.
All these things that are happening, Perry, is telling us, if you will, Elijah, get our
ready.
act together.
Yeah, speak up.
Get our act together.
Speak